I checked this out because this was specifically in the state case. And so I thought it was interesting that they've got what you were just talking about. There's a federal case and there's a state case. And, I wanted to throw this out when you said concurrent jurisdiction. I saw a really funny t-shirt the other day that said concurrent jurisdiction. That's like the original buy one, get one. And I thought that's a great way to explain it because, our clients are like, what does concurrent mean? What does consecutive mean? It means at the same time. That means the feds and the state can prosecute you at the same time. And lucky for us, we have a perfect example. Luigi, he's being prosecuted by both. So last week we had a hearing. We had a series of hearings actually, and I think this is really interesting. So I wanted to spend the most of our time talking about it because I love search and seizure issues, and I particularly like debating them with a former prosecutor. So just to kind of give our viewers, an update of what's happening here. So Luigi's in court, and they're really trying to get some stuff suppressed. What are they trying to get suppressed? What they found in his bag. It sounds like the police arrested him 100 miles away or so from the crime scene, arrested him at a fast food restaurant. He had a backpack on. They started questioning him. He gave him an ID. It was a false ID. So they arrested him for false ID. But did they really arrest him? That's one of the things we're going to be debating. So they charge him with this. They handcuff him. And then one of the officers is asking him questions. He says, I don't want to answer any questions. But this officer keeps asking questions. And so he's talking. So one of the issues is whether or not those statements can actually come in because they were pre-Miranda. And then the other issue is that backpack. So they took it off at the scene. They did a little search of it. They said incident to arrest. And then about 10 to 15 minutes later, back at the station, they did an actual thorough search of it. But they did it without a search warrant. So I think that's going to be a real interesting thing to see where this ends up. But let's first talk about these statements. I'm a defense lawyer. I'm going to argue that these statements were coerced. He's in handcuffs. He's not free to leave. Luigi should have been read his rights at that point. He's not read his rights. He told the police, I don't want to talk to you anymore. They kept asking him questions. Dave, how do you keep that in as a prosecutor?
I do think that defense lawyers have a better argument on the pre-Miranda statements than they do on suppressing the backpack. I think all that stuff in the backpack, that's coming in, and that's gold. That's so crucial. The statements are helpful, but they're not a necessity for prosecutors, and the judge knows that. But the argument the prosecutors would make is that he wasn't arrested, and he technically could have asked to go and leave. It wasn't a full custodial interrogation, and thus the statements are going to come in. Now, he's going to say that, but I said that I didn't want to speak anymore. But what exactly did he say? He never asked for a lawyer. If he asked for a lawyer, done. Can't say or can't question him anymore. But he didn't. He stopped speaking, and it's not clear what he said to the officers, but then the officers continued to speak to him, and he responded. So there shouldn't be that big of a Miranda issue, although I can see the judge throwing the defense a bone and saying, well, once he said, I don't want to talk anymore, if that's what he said, we don't know exactly the words, then you have to stop it. But there is a good argument for prosecutors to make that, number one, he wasn't arrested, so no Miranda warnings were needed. Number two, if this was a custodial interrogation, he, first off, never asked for a lawyer and never made it clear that he wanted to absolutely stop talking, and the prosecutors, the law enforcement officers kept going. So you got a bunch of arguments for the state to get all this stuff in.
Yeah. I unfortunately agree with you. I think the statements are going to come in. I would argue the crap out of them not coming in. How can you be free to leave when you have handcuffs on and they're searching your bag? No one's going to leave when their bag is in the custody of the police. That's not normal, so we'd be arguing that. I think the search, I disagree with you though on the search of the backpack. I think they've got a really good argument on the subsequent search. And I think that was really interesting to me. I was trying to pay attention to the actual timeline, and we're always looking at these timelines with search and seizure issues. So the officer, and this I did want to bring up, I made a note of this, the officer who is in full police uniform, Dave, they're trained to do that. They're taught to do that. I know as a prosecutor, you probably told police all the time, come in your full uniform. She's probably off duty when she's coming in, but by God, she is on the stand in her full uniform. And that's to have an effect on the court, that is. It's undoubtedly to have an effect on the court, right? You used to tell people that, I'm sure.
Sure. Yeah, but what's the problem? She's a police officer. Why can't she come in uniform?
No, she can. She can totally come in uniform. I just always like to point it out, because it is a show of force. It says something different, it signals something different. But I understand. I go to court in my,
Well,
my suit and, look like a lawyer.
defendants, because defendants go to court all dressed up. I've seen defendants go to
Oh yeah.
court with their tattoos on their face covered
Oh
up.
yeah.
And they have disgusting tattoos on their face, but it's all covered with makeup, like they would ever go out in public with makeup, or they would never dress up like Luigi does. Luigi is normally a slob. He's like a young, privileged college student, the Ivy League guy, and so yeah, they get to put on their airs. So why can't police officers wear their uniform?
I have personally put makeup on clients in trials. I can say I have put the scar cover makeup on tattoos in trial. So I definitely can attest that we definitely do that. But so talking about the suppression though, this backpack, I want to kind of dig into it a little more because I think it's interesting. So he at the scene, this officer, this uniformed officer, she takes the bag, she looks at it, she doesn't do a full search, but she says that it's incident to arrest. And so she's saying, well, I needed to check it to make sure there's not a bomb. Okay. So that's her reason. So then she takes it, all she finds is the magazine. So she finds the magazine. She doesn't find the gun. She doesn't find the silencer, and she doesn't find the what they're calling the manifesto. And I hate to use that word because I'm a defense lawyer. I don't want to use a manifesto, but that's kind of what it is. So she finds that she doesn't find that stuff at the scene. She takes the backpack. She drives back to the precinct, and then she goes through it in detail. Okay, so he's already in the process of being booked. We know who he is. Could have gotten a search warrant at that point. So they're going through the backpack, and that is when she's like, oh, I found gold, a gun. And I think she even said something about that, said some explanation about how great this is that she found a gun. And said, yeah, it's effing him, 100%, like super excited that she found this gun. So at that point, they could have gotten a search warrant. It's undisputed they didn't have a search warrant. That's not incident to arrest. That's an inventory search. That is back at the station. That is a 100% inventory search. How are you going to get that evidence in? How are you going to get that manifesto in, that gun, and that silencer in?
Well, first off, you're an excellent lawyer, and that's a great argument. There's the inevitable discovery rule that this was going to be found anyways. Prosecutors will often rely on that. I think also because there's a history here, the law enforcement officer said that in the past they brought a bomb to the police station. And that's something that here's a guy who's very dangerous, and they wanted to make sure that they didn't bring a bomb to the police station. So they empty it out, and there's a gun. There's apparently a loaded gun right there. So they were inevitably going to be able to get access to everything. They are there to protect themselves. They've had a history of bringing a bomb to the police station. They have a dangerous person. And although, yes, you're correct, the search was not at the same time as the arrest, they are entitled to search the backpack there. The fact that they decided to complete the search later, maybe they miss a compartment at the time of the search, that shouldn't suppress the entire thing.
I think it'll be interesting to see what the judge does. And I know that the judges try very hard to keep evidence like this in. And so, we'll see. We'll see what happens. What did you think about the other things they found in that backpack? The to-do list, the eyebrows. Did you notice on his to-do list about plucking his eyebrows?
Well, that's how he was caught. Remember, he was in the Altoona McDonald's wearing a mask, and he was caught because of his bushy eyebrows. Yeah. It's very Brian Koberger-esque.
Very.
That's the bushy eyebrows. Give it away. Yeah, that's a tip to all you future murderers. Maybe you want to trim your eyebrows, get some manscaping going on, right? Not that I would ever give advice to murderers. These people are awful, but still, they were caught by their eyebrows. So there is a tip for the future. And also, that is real evidence. I mean, that's the fact that he has written trim eyebrows. Why would you say that? Is he all of a sudden becoming Metro? Is that the thing? No, he's trying to get away with it. Just like he said, I think in there, you got to get like a escape kit or whatever. It's like a
survival bag, escape kit. Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you need a survival bag, right? Mm-hmm. You need a survival bag because you committed a heinous crime. So yeah, that is devastating evidence against him.
I know. I think that note is definitely going to be devastating evidence. I think the manifesto is probably the most, where he's talking about his motives and things like that. I'm just wondering, I'm looking at this list and I'm like, okay, so he had a flash drive, a digital camera, and a light source were the things that he needed to get at Best Buy. Like, what did this man have planned next?
Well, thankfully he was stopped because if he's a true believer, as he does seem to be, then killing one insurance executive would not be enough for this guy. You know what I really didn't like about all this stuff actually was in court, they have this picture. I think we have it where he's doing like a fist pump.
Yes.
There it is.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
like
Yes.
first
Yes.
of all, he's
Yes.
modeling. That's the cover of like GQ. He knows
Yes.
what he's doing. This to me angers me because he cost two kids their father, and there he doesn't look repentant at all.
Yeah.
Doesn't look remorseful. He's got a great lawyer, Karen Agnifilo, next to him. I know her. She's a great lawyer. But this guy needs to get a hold of himself, check himself, and know that he's been given a life of privilege. He's a good-looking guy, and he deserves to spend, in my mind, the rest of his life in prison, if not worse, because the feds are going to come in next with concurrent jurisdiction and seek the death penalty.
Yeah. No, they are. And I think that's what's going to be really interesting about things like this that he's doing when you get the death penalty case. Because, while this stuff that he's, the fist pump and all this stuff he's doing, it's not really relevant in the Manhattan case. But they've got the death penalty case, and the feds want to actually seek the death penalty. So all of this stuff that he's making it out to be a joke, I think is going to come back and bite him.
By the way, I think that's absolutely right. Don't underestimate that. I do think the Attorney General Bondi is watching this, and when she sees that, she's going to be like, we're not giving this up. This is exactly why the feds came in the first place. They didn't trust New York State prosecutors to do it right. Plus, they knew that New York doesn't have the death penalty, and so here they are.
I know. And I think that's going to be interesting. Also, I thought it was interesting, his lawyer, I'm sure that was difficult for her because, I've been in court where I've wanted to take my heel off and literally pummel my client with it to stop doing whatever it is he's doing in front of a jury or a judge. But, her husband is Diddy's lead lawyer. So I thought that was interesting. What we're going to see, but she's not representing him in federal court. So I also thought that was interesting. She is actually only handling the Manhattan case, and he's got a death penalty lawyer appointed in the federal case. So I wonder, with these parallel proceedings, I wonder how that's going to play out. One being focused on the death penalty and one being focused on what's happening in Manhattan and with that jury pool. But
interesting. Well, I know Karen, and she is a state law expert, and that's probably why she's going to focus on the state law and punching holes in the state case and let a federal expert when it comes to death penalty cases handle it. But he's definitely getting the best lawyering that money can buy because he's a guy of privilege. He's the one who's complaining about the system. He seems to benefit from the system very well.